Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's great to see so many delegates here today working on their business rather than working in it. Unless you are one of those lucky retirees. Are there any lucky retirees in the room? One or two? Okay, so just keeping your hand in, sort of like reservists. We might need you back. So it's my absolute pleasure today to represent Coachworks Consulting here at the National Motorcycle Museum. Thanks for the intro, Georgia. I've got 3 topics to talk about today, and I want to have a chat with you, and I want to converse, and I'd like you to have a conversation with me. So if at any point you have a question, shout it out. If you'd rather just make a note and ask it at the end of the presentation in about 40 minutes' time, that's fine too. So can we have a chat? Yeah? And can we keep it real? Let's keep it real. I might introduce a little bit of theory from time to time, but I'm going to apply it in a very real-world way. Okay? So, specifically, what I'd like to cover with you today is 1, how to have a really motivated team. Would you say that's more important today than ever before? Fair few, yeah, a lot of nodding heads. Okay, so we should talk about that. We're then going to talk about how you can transform performance within those team members. Practically, and often at 0 cost, just the way we actually go about leading them. So we're going to talk about transforming performance. And the third thing we're going to talk about is how we retain the best talent. Now, if you've experienced a loss of some good talent, if you've got a bit of staff churn going on in your business, just give me a show of hands. Let me see where you are right now. If you've had any staff churn, okay, hand up there, hand up here. Okay, the hands are going up. So you know what I mean. Retaining the best talent is a challenge. Some interesting stats from Steve, wouldn't you agree? I think he said we're entering an 8-year window where we're going to have less kids leaving school than since the Second World War. That makes it a really, really important point, more important than ever before. And what I'm going to do as I wrap this presentation up is just be clear on the so what. Why are we talking about this stuff? Why is it so important? And what needs to happen next? Okay? Now, would you do one thing for me? Would you please stand? There's a lot of negativity around Great Britain right now. Wouldn't you agree with that? Yes. A lot of negativity. So I want to be really positive in congratulating you for taking a day out to work on your business. But would you help me with this? Would you turn to the person next to you and would you give him or her a really heartfelt congratulations, a handshake, a slap on the back, or maybe even a hug? Congratulations. Okay, take a seat. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely feeling the love already. So let's move into this. Let's move into this first topic, if we may. Okay. So we're going to talk about a motivated team. Here's a question for you. How do you know whether you've got a motivated team or not? There's certainly a telltale sign of a lack of motivation.
Performance and staff retention.
Okay, performance and staff retention. Stephen, thank you. Okay, well that's definitely one measure.
Happiness.
Happiness, okay. That's a measure, isn't it? And there's some quite scientific sort of surveys being utilised in this market and lots of markets around the world.
They can be an ambassador for your business as well.
Okay.
Someone's motivated.
Okay, so we'll take it to the next level. Okay, this is good participation, Martin, isn't it? Okay, I think I'm going to have to work for my lunch today. Okay, well definitely, if you can have self-motivated people in your business, it makes motivating the team easy. Would you agree with that? And one of the measures of a demotivated team is absenteeism. Would you agree with that? It's only one of the measures, but it's arguably arguably, possibly the most important measure. Now there's a stat on that, I'm just going to enlarge it. Next year, the cost of absenteeism in the UK is estimated to be £21 billion, going up to a massive £26 billion by the end of the decade. That's a huge sum, isn't it? And that's got to be funded. So we know the cost of a demotivated team can be absenteeism. It's just one of the KPIs. In each of these topics, I'm going to identify the what's, okay? And then I'm going to turn it on its head and identify the how's. Does that sound okay? Because it's easy to talk about the what's, isn't it? It's doing something about it that's important. Okay, so we know absenteeism is one of the KPIs that you could use to measure motivation. Another thing that we have to do if we want to have a motivated team is know those team members. Now, there's a number of people making notes, well, a lot of people making notes right now. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to extend the invitation for you to actually grab hold of your mobile phone, turn on the camera mode if you wish, and take a photograph at any point, okay? So if at any point you want to, if I show you some models or some facts, if you want to snap away and use your camera to do that, by all means, or make notes. Okay, you don't know your people. Now, I'm looking around the room, it's quite a mature room, I'm trying not to look at the oldest person in the room at this point, but is there anybody, despite their stage in life, is there anybody dating right now? One or two people looking at their shoes in a sort of slightly guilty way, so we won't go there. Okay, well anybody got a good memory? Anybody with an elephantine memory? If you can think back all those years to when you were dating, did you bother to get to know that boy or girl when you were dating? Maybe that first date?
Yeah.
You do, don't you? When you're dating, you bother to get to know that person because you're probably wishing to impress them. Okay, so I'm stating the obvious. You've got to know your people if you're going to motivate your people. So we'll talk about how in a moment. Another point is you've got to engage those people. Has anybody been to a party where they're sitting next to the party bore that just keeps talking about themselves? Yeah. Yeah. You've got to get them engaged. It seems obvious, but if I look around the room, ask yourself, are your team members engaged? Because compliance is different than commitment, isn't it? Commitment just takes it to the next level. So, in having a motivated team, we've got to engage those team members. Maybe easier said than done. One of the 7 biggest causes of people leaving their employer is an obvious lack of trust in them. You can Google this stuff, it's out there. So we've got to build trust within our team members if we want to have a really motivated team. So should we talk about that as well? You okay? We'll do that. And finally, you've got to recognise your people. Is there anybody in the room that represents an OEM or an NSC, National Sales Company? Okay, a couple of, may I ask which brand?
The Kia Motors.
Kia and Jaguar Land Rover. Okay. Well, do you have these Net Promoter
Yes,
score? Yeah, okay. NPS, you've got it as well, Adrian? Right, okay. Right. Because those 8s aren't worth much, are they? Those 8 scores aren't worth much, but those 9s and 10s are worth a lot. And what we definitely, so I'm here with my colleague, the Ops Director from Coachworks, Consultant Martin, what we definitely see is a lot of recognition of those red flag moments, those poor scores. But when we ask the question of those businesses, how much recognition is there for progressing through the workloads or get to the 9 or 10? We don't hear enough about that. So I'm going to compel you, I'm going to give you some advice on how we can actually build some recognition. Do you think that would be good in today's market more than ever? We need a highly motivated team, don't we? Okay. So that's not earth-shattering stuff really, is it? But there is a difference between knowing and doing. And we need to do more of the doing. So let's actually move it forward. So, how can we build a motivated team? Definitely, if we want to find self-motivated people and invite them into our team, we need to look for evidence that they are self-starters. Can I tell you about some evidence I stumbled across just over 30 years ago? Now this might sound like the start of a joke, but it's not, okay? A guy once knocked on my door for a job. My background is retail. I retailed twice, I've worked for 2 OEMs, and I've consulted for 17, 18 years. And when I was retailing, somebody knocked on my door just over 30 years ago, and it was Colin. And Colin was looking for a job. And I promise you, this is not the start of a joke, because the rocking horse factory they'd been working at for 4 years had just closed down. I didn't know what the rocking horse factory market was like, but he'd just lost his job. The bottom had fallen out of rocking horses, it would appear. Now Colin proved to me that he was a self-starter because he lived in Nantwich in South Cheshire, and he'd been cycling to the rocking horse factory on the Crewgates Industrial Estate for 4 years. And I can't remember whether it was 3 miles or 4 miles there, but it was 3 or 4 miles apart. And he'd been cycling there, and he'd been cycling back. And sometimes he'd been cycling there and back during strange times of the day, because when the rocking horse market was really good, they were running a shift system. And he'd done that for 4 years. He was a self-starter. He was getting on his bike, doing a Norman Tebbit, riding to work for 4 years, 6 or 8 miles a day, come rain or shine, and when the rocking horse factory closed, he knocked my door for a job. He was a self-starter. And he rocked up to do a valeting job, tough job. What do you think Colin's doing right now?
Running his own business.
He's not running his own business, but he's still valeting cars in that same dealership 31 years on.
Has he got a car now?
He's got a wife, a car and a baby. Because he embraced me like a lost brother when I saw him recently. So you want evidence of a self-starter? I could tell you about a client of ours where their number 2 in HR really got she got her first break because she funded herself all the way through uni, serving chips and doing all those sort of jobs that maybe she didn't want to do, but she was just a self-starter and it was evident. So if we're going to have self-motivated people, you can normally spot that, can't you? You can spot that in the way they're living their lives and the way that they're behaving. But it's easy to have a motivated team if you've got some self-motivated people in it, and then it's just a case, Nick, of not demotivating them, isn't it? Don't knock the bolt in, just keep them motivated. Okay, so you'll know this next point probably, particularly if you've been associated with sales, the sales sector, not necessarily car sales, but you will know, it's been proven, there are basically 4 personality profiles. Can anybody tell me what they are? Just a bit of audience participation there.
Red, yellow, blue, green.
Okay, well we could talk about the colours if we turn it into the language. Anybody?
D-I-S-C, is that one? Disc,
What?
D-I-S-C.
Okay, we could talk about disc. We could talk about that profile. I'm just going to give you the language if I may. Okay.
Oh,
You'll recognise this now. George is sort of nodding. I get it, okay. There's the entertainer, there's the feeler, there's the thinker and the controller. So you've probably done this, let me just remind you very quickly. If you know your people, which was point 2, wasn't it? If you know your people and you know what their personality traits are, you can work with them in a way that's going to suit them best. So if you've got somebody that likes to be on the front foot and to be in control, you're going to try and leave some control at their disposal. If you take that control away, they're going to be uncomfortable. Now, my personality profile, apparently, and it's always proven, Georgia, seems to be controller and entertainer. I like to have a bit of fun. I like to have people around me that enjoy a bit of fun. I like to make the hard simple. I like to make the boring exciting. So if anybody can give me the opportunity where I can stay with at least a modicum of control, I'm comfortable with that. And if I can have some fun, and if I can be allowed to create some fun, even better. Thinker, by very nature of the title, these people might need a bit of time. They need to compute. They want to understand it and think it through. And feeler, their emotions are everything. They need to feel good about that situation and who they're partnering with and so forth. So just like that first date, is there anybody that can remember that first date? Gentleman over here, smiling, his shoulders were going up and down. Did you crash and burn?
No, very successful, always am Carl.
Okay. You'd have made it, what's your name, friend?
Matt.
Matt, you'd have made it your business, Matt, to really know that person, wouldn't you? And you'd have probably then presented yourself in a way to suit that person. Try not to play the sexes there, because it's 2019. So, we're going to present ourselves, what we do, what we say, in a way that's going to suit the audience, the person that we're with. I can prove to you now that this next point really works. If you've got a team of motivated people, very, very, very smart thing to do. Tell them where you want to go. But don't tell them how to get there. And if you go back to that quote that's all over the internet from the late Steve Jobs, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. Having a team of people that are clear on where you want to get to is key. But if you can engage them in how you're going to get there, fantastic. I've made it my business, Matt, to surround myself with people that are smarter than me, that compensate for the gaps that I have in my skill set or behaviours. Definitely, definitely. Let's try and get people that are engaged, that join you in that sort of vision of where you're going, and embrace them and actually say, okay, this is how we can move forward. What do you think the fourth point is? Let's have this as a shout out if we can. What do you think we've got to do? How are we going to motivate these people? Any thoughts?
Invest in them.
Okay, thank you. What's your name, sir? Thank you. Invest in them. Okay, well, I would definitely agree with that. Here's another point. Invest in them to be competent. And forgive them if they fail. But what we can't forgive, what we can't accommodate is incompetence. The more we can invest in them to make them competent, the better. We're going to get that return. And if you think back to, is there anybody here from the IMI other than Georgia? Okay, may I ask your name, sir?
Sorry, I represent the IMI Member Association. I'm not an IMI employee.
Okay, that's fine. What's your name, friend?
Paul Jarvis.
Paul, okay. I think Steve or somebody within the IMI a few years ago had that slogan put onto the mug. What if we train them and they leave and they stay? It's a sort of CEO, Chief Financial Officer sort of debate, isn't it? We've got to invest in our people. That's a hell of a motivator. And we can tolerate failure if people give a damn and they're trying their best. But what we can't tolerate is incompetence, because that is a massive demotivator on teams and organisations. When they look around the room and they think, hang on, you know, these are not competent people around me. And the fifth point I'd like to share with you with regards to how. Let's celebrate success more than we do currently. Definitely, when that bad score, that bad report, that letter of complaint comes, of course we jump on it. And so we should, because we need to use that opportunity to try and turn that customer's opinion and improve their experience. Let's celebrate success more than we do currently. It's a hell of a market out there right now, isn't it? It's a hell of a market, it's a tough job. Let's find every opportunity to celebrate some success. And it might be, if it was customer experience, that we're moving through the scores. We're having less 1s, 2s and 3s, and we're turning those into 4s, 5s and 6s. Okay, they're not 9s and 10s. Okay, maybe we didn't do budget and car sales. Maybe we haven't quite got that red conversion rate that we want on VHC and after sales. But let's celebrate progress. Yeah, let's recognise that. Does that sound like a fair deal? It does, doesn't it? Now, put your hands up. I want this to be like a cathartic moment. Yeah? Put your hands up if you think you could be celebrating success. Maybe it's not terminal success, as in you've got to the final goal, but maybe a step in the right direction. Put your hands up if you feel maybe you could celebrate success more in your business, in your team. You'll feel good. You're letting it go. You're letting it go now, aren't you? You're human. You're in the whirlwind of the day job. It's typical. But let's celebrate success more.
How would that celebration take place in a real situation?
What a great question. Can we have a round of applause here? Have you noticed we're already celebrating a great question? Okay. There's a myriad of ways, isn't there? There's a myriad of ways. I would say the most important thing is just to recognise the point in the first instance. Recognise that colleague or team's progress. Peer recognition is a hell of a drug, isn't it? A hell of a drug. So purely signposting it in the first instance, showcasing it wide and far or appropriately, thanking somebody for that level of progress and success is good. Beyond that, as one of those non-franchise motor traders once said, you may know him, Arthur Daly. Yeah? After that, the world's your lobster. You can celebrate it in any way, but let's just have a quick shout out. 2 or 3 shout outs. If you're celebrating success in your business in a particular way and it's working, just showcase your business right now. Anybody? What are you doing to celebrate success?
Employee of the month.
Employee of the month. Okay, round of applause, please. Give me another one. Give me another one.
Best achiever in the first 90 days in a row.
Best achiever in the first 90 days. First 90 days, that's really smart. Come on, round of applause here, please. And one more. Let's see if we can get the hat trick.
I'll go with it.
Come on then.
Beer Friday.
Beer Friday.
Beer Friday.
They're not driving home, are they?
Well, I know it's a bit of a contentious one, but yeah.
Beer Friday, okay. Okay, Beer Friday and bus home Friday, yeah? Okay, round of applause, please. I will just tell you a quick story if I may. It was a business that Martin was working in, and it was a Jaguar Land Rover business where they had an award, and the award was, and it was some work that we were doing with this particular group, one of the premium retail groups, and the award was, the winner would get, let me get this right, Martin, a car for the weekend, this was Droitwich, wasn't it? A car for the weekend, an overnight stay at a spa hotel, and did it include an extra day off, or was that another side? A Friday off, an extra day, a luxury car for the weekend, an overnight stay at a spa, all expenses. Say again?
Distillery tour.
A distillery tour, all expenses paid. Fantastic. Who won it?
The manager.
The 17-year-old apprentice who couldn't drive, didn't drink, and let me tell you, there were some cougars circling that young man. So it's about it being appropriate, isn't it? But you've got the point, you know this stuff, and it's the difference between knowing and doing. Because the day job, the whirlwind of the day job just pulls us down, doesn't it? We know this stuff. We know this stuff. So, there's a few thoughts about how we can achieve a motivated team. But go back to that first point, make it easy for yourself. Try and employ as many self-motivated people as you can, those self-starters. We've got a really good audience here, haven't we? Loads of participation, and I'd say, come on, knock yourself out. Let's really go for it on this next point, yeah? Yeah? Because this is a biggie. Okay. Transforming performance. Right. For this one, I think I'm going to have to take the jacket off, because this is really hot stuff. So here's a question to you guys. How do you transform performance?
Finding out why it needs transforming.
Okay, so finding out why. That's a good start point. Okay, well let's get into this. Let's start with the what's first. Okay, right. Definitely, guys, anybody that you employ, they need to know their reason for being employed. There's a gentleman here looking at me as if to say, really?
No, I agree.
Really? Really? Okay, right. There's an American auto manufacturer that went into Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in 2008, I think it was, or 9. Anybody tell me what that organisation was? General Motors, okay. And bizarrely, they parachuted in a merchant banker to actually sort it out. Whereas he was sort of like fixing his own problem, I suppose, wasn't he? But this guy walked around the organisation asking all these senior principals what they did. This is true, this is in a published book, you may have read it. And they all kept giving their titles. And eventually he got really frustrated. And he said, can somebody just tell me what you do? I don't need your title, I can read your title. What do you do? And he wanted them to say, I'm responsible for. I'm going to share with you in a short while this very point, and I promise you it will transform your performance if your team members can tell you why they're employed. On one hand, yeah? Because I found if you go take your socks off to count how many reasons why you're employed, you're probably not sufficiently focused. So they need to know why they're employed. Okay? The second point, you need a culture of performance. So should we expand upon that in a moment? How we create a culture of performance. If you're proud of your team and your team is currently highly performing, or performing well, just put your hands up. And this is not a time to be modest, so the lady from Kia, okay, yeah. So, okay, we've got about a third of the hands going up, okay. Right, so we need a culture of performance. I'm going to lean on you guys in a moment if that's okay. Just makes my job a bit easier. We need a culture of performance because that's going to drive everything that we do. The third thing we need to do is set some stretch goals. Nothing more demoralising than a goal, a target that can't be achieved. And there's nothing more damaging than a target that's too easy to achieve. So we're going to talk about how we create a bit of stretch. Yeah? The fourth thing is we've got to continually coach our team members. Anybody struggling to get the time they would really like, the time that they feel their team members deserve to be coached? Anybody struggling to get that coaching time right now? Hand out up here, hand there. Okay. Well, you've got to find this next bit really relevant. Because those golden coaching moments that you sort of put your arms around and protect are hard to create. So we're going to talk about coaching on the go, yeah? Coaching whilst you're moving, whilst you're going from A to B. And the fifth thing, if you want to transform your team, You need to take that greatest cost that walks into the business every day on two legs, and you need to turn it into the biggest asset you possibly can. Now, just like some businesses change hands because their database is valuable, where organisations are swallowed up and encompassed into bigger organisations because the database of users, clients, customers is really valuable, so too are employees. If you've got a high-performing team, those employees can go from being a cost to an asset. But we've got to consider them human capital in the first place. So we're going to talk about that. In respect to transforming performance, is there anything that you want me to try and accommodate into this next piece? And I'll try to do that. Is there any aspect of transforming performance in your team? And if we do get a shout out, just make a note, Martin, if you don't mind. Anything you want me to try and cover in this next piece? Well, I can't look at those that are already highly performing, but I could. But I'll start with
maybe motivating the whole team. You know, I know you said reward or encourage individuals, but really you want, like in my workshop, you want to work as a team, and like I set their bonuses as a team rather than individual. But yeah, it's not working brilliantly. But
okay. So how you can encompass that and spread that around the whole team. Thank you for that. What's your name?
Peter.
Thanks, Peter. Okay. So right, being able to apply it across the whole team. Okay.
Some
Any other
manufacturers
questions?
have the balanced scorecard method of measuring the best dealer in the year, dealer of the year, measuring various aspects of the dealership. You could use that to say to your team, we are going to be the #1 dealer.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
That unites everybody.
Thank you. What's your name?
Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay. Any other thoughts? So, whole team, and some advice there. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, most people would probably say that within their team there's probably one or two individuals who currently perform well. So my question is, how do you keep the top performers performing?
How do you keep the top performers performing?
What impact does that have on the rest of the team?
Okay, Martin's got that. Okay. And how can that impact on the rest of the team? Right, thank you. Don't let me go off this topic without answering those questions. Okay, so that's the what. But there's a big difference between knowing and doing. So let's talk about the doing. Let's talk about the how. Okay. The first thing you have to do, if people are going to understand their reason for being, is you've got to give them what we term, you can call it anything you like, but you've got to give them their value drivers. Some people making notes now. Now, I once raised this with somebody who's really quite grumpy. I'm not going to say his name, Chris Elvidge. I've said it now. Good client of ours. And he looked at me as if to say, don't give me any of that management consultant speak. I said, look, bear with me, calm down. It's not. This is really, really clear stuff. Value drivers are simply this. If you've got a team of people that can say on one hand, these are the 5 key reasons of me being employed, that's a really, really good thing. 5 actions that drive value in them being in part of the team. And can I give you an example maybe? And I'll give it as an after-sales example if I may. And I'll ask for a bit of facilitation here. A vehicle technician, okay, let's say it's a generalist, it's not a specialist role, it's an all-rounder, so a vehicle technician. 5, and let's say if I may, it's in a franchise dealership. Are you in a franchise dealership?
no, independent.
Okay, well this might apply, but there's one aspect that's definitely in the franchise world. What are 5 things that a technician really has to do? If there was only time to do 5 things, you'd want him or her to be doing these 5 things. Give me a shout out, what you think it might be. One thing.
Good customer service.
Okay, can we turn that into maybe fixing the car right first time? That would contribute to good customer service, maybe, wouldn't it? If the customer didn't have to come back. So fixing the car right first time fix. That's one thing. What else?
Efficient.
Efficient, doing the job in the time allowed, maybe. So fixing it right first time, doing it efficiently.
Following required process.
Following required process. And could we call that the vehicle health check?
Yeah.
And maybe the video. Let's say the electronic vehicle health check. That's part of the process. Because that performs 2 key tasks, doesn't it? What's the 2 key tasks of the vehicle health check?
Yeah. upsell opportunity, and it's
Don't
customer
start
satisfaction.
Don't start there. It's duty of care,
Yeah.
isn't it? You're giving the car a check over. You might only be working in one part of the car, but it's on the ramp, it's in the shop. You're going to give it a check over, duty of care. And of course, if you're giving the customer a great experience, and if you've got their vehicle there, and if you've identified their tyres are at 3mm, and if you report that, and if you communicate it in a way that constitutes best advice, the customer might actually say, well, yeah, given that I'm doing 40,000 miles a year, I don't want to come back in a month. When I've worn off that last millimetre or so, yeah, put the tyres on. So VHC, so right first time, help the customer experience. Efficiency, help the profitability. Process, EVHC, there's three things.
Maximum customer satisfaction scores.
Okay, so that might be, for example, a technician, and help me out with this, that might be that they get the job done on time, they've done all the work on the list, they've put the radio controls and the seating position back to where it started, that they haven't left any oily hand marks on it if the car was pre-cleaned before it came into the shop, to help with that to the end of the day. That would be a fourth thing there. Do you see where we're going with this? How would you feel if all of it, put your hands up if you do hire technicians, franchised or non-franchised, just a quick show of hands. If you've got technicians in your world, okay, not too many then, okay. How would you feel that if your team of technicians, maybe your team of technicians, could all tell you, I've got to be really good, really focused on these 5 things? Do you think that would be a healthy start point? It would, wouldn't it? It really would be. And I can tell you now, this transforms performance. And particularly when you can say it on one hand, very succinctly, you can document it onto a very small piece of paper, because it's the value drivers that keep the performance high, and it means that all that other HR paperwork isn't so readily needed, because in your business, probably like mine, you've got all that employment paperwork to keep your colleagues and yourself safe and to make sure that you win in court because you follow your own process. But what we're talking about here with value drivers is actually we never go to court because we have a high performing team, because they're really focused and they know what they should be doing. And we're focused on actually keeping them concentrating on the key reasons for being employed. The second point is something called disciplines of execution. Has anybody read the book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, or 4DX as it's sometimes abridged? Fantastic. How about if I give you the essence of the book in about 2 minutes? Does that sound good value? Yeah? I'm going to be like a one-man audio book now, Georgia. So, unless you're teasing me, if you haven't read it, it's going to be new to you. I would definitely urge you to go and get this book. And you can get it on audio too. So if you're doing a big daily commute, you can listen to it on the way to and from the office. Right, the 4 disciplines of execution. And there are so many case studies that prove this actually works. Now, it's a book that was written by 3 co-authors, and it's a book that was written by North Americans, and if you get the audio book, you're going to hear a transatlantic accent. Get over it. Get over it. It's an American book. It's a brilliant book, and we've been using it with our clients for some time now. The 4 disciplines of execution. 1, that you have a team of people focused on what is typically known as the wildly important goal. A team of people focused on one common goal. And really that fits with the whole definition of teamwork, doesn't it? Teamwork, a group of individuals gathered together in pursuit of a common goal. So if you can get your team absolutely focused on where they're going, it might be driving that efficiency. If you can get them clear on where they're going, what that wildly important goal is, and make sure that all of their efforts are supporting that wildly important goal, that's a start point. The second thing it teaches you is that you need to act on the lead measures. Has anybody heard the term lead and lag? A couple of people nodding here, gentlemen there. Okay. Let me just explain this really quickly. You want to do your budget for April. That's a lag measure. At the end of April, you've done your budget. Would you agree with that? It's a lag measure, a terminal measure. A lead measure might be how many VHCs that you complete. Because as you said, those VHCs are an opportunity to present additional work that's required. So maybe if you focus on how many VHCs you complete, the lead measure, that could contribute to the lag measure, doing your budget. Does that make sense? Now, I worked with a colleague who was a client of ours, he was a senior role, director level role at an OEM, and he had a parts budget that wasn't going his way. And he said with a wry smile, no matter how long I look at this screen, it doesn't seem to change. And he had his tongue in his cheek when he said it. That's the lag measure. It's the lead measure, those things that we're going to do to contribute, those living live KPIs that are key. Okay, that might be in a shop, and you've experienced it at probably a petrol station where somebody's saying, would you like to have this deal on chocolate, 2 bars for £1? Really annoying when you've just lost a bit of weight, isn't it? Putting temptation in front of you. So focus on the lead measure, because that will influence the lag measure. The third thing is keep a compelling scoreboard. So if I may, I'm going to give you an example of a high-performing Audi business in Cheshire with a really talented head of after-sales. And he'd been round the block as well. He was a really experienced guy. And he's now a head of business, which I'm delighted by because you don't see that transition so often from after-sales into a head of business role. And I'll give him an alias, Fred. Fred was a really controlling individual. If we'd have done psychometric on him, it'd have been a really high scorer for controlling. And every day at 10 o'clock he would walk into his, this is only about 3 years ago, he'd walk into his after-sales department and he would make sure that that board, and he wanted it visually, there was all the management reports, but he wanted that board on the wall, bang up to date. So he had a compelling scoreboard, and it was measuring those key handful of things, lead and lag. However, we took it to the next level. How did we take the compelling scoreboard to the next level? What did we do differently with that scoreboard? Anybody take a punt at that?
Yeah, that's target over what you're actually achieving.
Say that again,
You've got
sorry.
to set your target over what you're actually
That
achieving.
old chestnut. So stick 10% on the target. Well, he was probably doing that anyway, because he's a wily fox. That wasn't it. Maybe not a bad thing, but that wasn't what he did. It took it to the next level. What did he do with that scoreboard?
Got all the team together once a week and explained it to them and showed them where they were doing well.
He was, and he still is, a really good communicator, and he was gathering them every day already. So he didn't, and they knew where they were. So that wasn't it, because he was already doing that. What did he do differently with the scoreboard?
So getting the team to take ownership of it and actually do it themselves.
Thank you. Thank you, okay. A pincer movement. He gave it to them. And they came up and they marked their performance. And they were taking ownership of the compelling scoreboard. And then they introduced a bit of colour to it. Mark, what colour did he use for success, do you think? Green. Green! And what colour for falling behind? Red. It was a really compelling scoreboard. And you walked around that corner and the most important lead measure was there, right in your face. And everybody just got engaged by it. However, what happened to the underperforming person? What did that person do? Leave. They left the business. Because it was a name and shame board. No, it wasn't. It was a success board. But the lowest performer swiftly left the business. And it was about the performer, it wasn't about the manager, because everybody else found that compelling scoreboard really good. The fourth thing, guys, create a cadence of accountability. And if you do read the book, fantastic, or listen to the book, even better. But in simple terms, that's a tell and show moment, where they have to commit what they're going to do in pursuit of that wildly important goal. And they have to meet on a regular basis, typically at least weekly, and actually say, I said I'd contact 5, there are my 5, or in fact I've got 6. But if you know you're going to rock up for that quick and dirty meeting, and you're going to have to tell and show, wow, it doesn't create some sort of manageable back pressure to get things done. How do you feel about that? 4DX, the 4 disciplines of execution. I'd urge you to read it. It's a belter, an absolute belter of a book. We're using this with our clients, and it makes a massive difference to transforming performance just by doing those 4 things. I did say we'd keep it real, didn't I? Okay. So what are these targets that get set every year, where it's pretty much based on last year plus a bit? What's that all about? Well, it's known, isn't it? Last year, the lag measure was last year was what last year was, and plus a bit. Okay, well, that's progress. But it can also be a real handbrake on performance. So what I'm going to urge you to do from this point on is to make sure that the opportunity to do business, the real OTDB, becomes known. You may have sold 10 of those parts or cars or whatever you were selling, but we needed to know really how many opportunities were there to sell. That might be in car sales, having that sort of traffic log of calls or inquiries or footfall. We've got to know the real opportunity to do business. And in the businesses that we work with that really embrace this, you see them take a big step forward. Now, if you've been part of a sort of business buyout, or if you've bought a business, or if you've witnessed it going on, when there's typically a takeover of leadership, I suppose, in simple terms, typically if it was an underperforming business, you see that new leader, that new regime, take a really big step. That's where the real opportunity has been identified. And everybody's got focused on that, and that probably becomes their wildly important goal. Okay? The 4th thing. These golden moments for coaching people are few and far between. But from walking to A to B, we've got clients that are following the 5 steps to coaching as they transit through their business. So would you help me with this? Would you just remind me what the 5 steps to coaching are? Would anybody give me a shout out? What's the first thing you should do when you're identifying, when you're trying to coach people? What's the first thing you should do?
Question, how are things going with you?
How are things going with you? Okay, we'll find out what space the person's in is a good thing to do. Could I maybe just extend that into this? Set clear goals. Be absolutely clear on what it is we're trying to achieve. The second thing, anybody?
Find out where they're at to start with.
Okay. And that helps you understand the opportunity to do business, doesn't it? Specifically, if you're trying to get rid of some of your job by skilling up those people around you, you need to demonstrate delivery. The third thing is you need to observe practice. You need to watch that colleague whose skill that you're trying to transfer. You need to see them perform that task that you're asking them to perform. The 4th thing is give them some constructive feedback. The C word, that's really important. And the 5th thing is clear reinforcement. Now, if anybody's feeling almost condescended that we're talking about this stuff, please forgive me. But when I've asked leaders and I've given them 5 post-it notes, and I said, just tell me the 5 most important things in your job, so often the C word, the coaching, is missed. And you see very busy leaders doing too much themselves, and we're talking about transferring that responsibility, aren't we? So there's 5 hows for transforming performance. Let's move on to the 3rd point. The final point rather, is to continually grow those people. So some sort of, we call it a PGP, personal growth plan, some sort of PGP that is away from remuneration, it's separate to that, some sort of basic plan for keeping that person going forward. Now somebody said, how do you continue to grow the high performers? Who was that? Who was the high performer point? Okay. The stretch for those people is really important. And if we think back to a racing ace, Michael Schumacher, how many times did he win the World F1 Championship? 7 times, okay? And do you think at the 5th time of winning it, they still carried on giving him feedback? Your 2 1,000ths of a second down in the middle sector, Michael? Do you think he ever radioed back to them? Well, you drive the bloody car then. They kept stretching him, didn't they? In respect of his diet, his fitness, the telemetry of the car, everything. So each time they attained a level of performance, they raised the bar to the next point of stretch. Okay, let's move on to the third point. How do you retain the best people? So just remind me, if you've lost somebody in the last year or two that you wouldn't have wished to lose, just give me a show of hands. You've had somebody leave the business, okay, several hands going up. This might help you. What do we need to do? Well, definitely, we need to understand that it's an employee's market. Would you agree with that? The lowest level of unemployment since 1974. 3.6% of the working age population unemployed. And then when you get into some markets like the southeast, anybody from the southeast? Okay, it's even tougher, isn't it? Let alone talking about inside the M25, really tough. So we've got to recognise that it's definitely an employee's market. And we'll talk about how we do that in a moment. And we've got to hire for culture. Because you can't train culture. And you don't want your culture destroyed, so we'll talk about that. The third thing is you've got to understand the gaps. Where are the gaps in that person's skill set? And if we know how wide the gaps are and how many there are, that might actually choose whether we actually bring that person onto the team or not. Because if we haven't got time to accommodate so many gaps, it's going to be a failure. Fourth thing is, there's a term around at the moment, well, I guess we're going to need to do more with less. Are you reading that? Are you hearing that? Anybody representing the Ford franchise? Okay, nobody in the room. I heard last week, I can't verify this, but I heard from the Ford retailer that Ford have canned a lot of their field roles. They've eliminated so many of those field roles. I'm going to check that out. You've got to do more with less. And the fifth thing is, let's recognise that employees lead managers, not businesses. So how can we affect that? Okay, well, let's look at this. First thing is, you need a strong employer brand. What's an employer brand? Anybody help me out with that?
It's a culture and ethos, not just a name.
A culture and an ethos. Okay, well, let me tell you now. It's the strong employer brand that means when somebody gives word that they're going to take the job, that person rocks up. Has anybody offered a job and then they've not shown? Yeah. Okay, it's really frustrating, isn't it? But in a full employment market, where only 3.6% of the working age population are out of work, there's a choice of jobs. So to have a strong employer brand, to be the employer of choice, and that's made up by a number of points, too many points to go into today, but I'd love to shoot the breeze with anybody on this point outside of this presentation. The strong employer brand will definitely not only attract but also help hold on to the best people. We need to go about, in the first instance, if we want to hold on to them, attracting the sort of people that we can have a long-term relationship with. We're not looking for a date, are we? We're looking for a marriage. Unless you're happy with a high churn of people, you want a long-term relationship. You're nodding to that point. You want a long-term relationship with your people. So you can't go about it as if it's a one-night stand, can you? Don't look so guilty, my friend. The third thing is you've got to complete due diligence. So how can you complete due diligence? How can you be sure about the person that you're attracting, that you're talking about this role to? Because if we get the hiring right to start with, holding on to those people will be easy. How can you be sure that you're attracting the right person?
References?
Get references.
We're working this man too hard, so you can look at references. What else can you do? So somebody's in your space, they're interested in that role, You want to have a marriage, not a one-night stand.
Rigorous process.
Rigorous process. So what was your name?
Damien.
Damien, thank you. So what could the process look like?
I think a key to it is asking deep delving questions at the interview to get out more information.
Okay.
Because what a lot of people put on their CV is not necessarily everything. And by asking lots of questions and shutting up, often they actually reveal a lot more than they realise there.
And what type of questions are you going to ask? In the simplest terms. Open questions, where you're going to have some information to analyse. So can we say a really thorough process that I would definitely say, and we're doing this right now, and we're doing this for 2 top 10 motor groups in the UK, definitely some assessment centres, which include a competency-based interview, which includes a psychometric, which includes skills-based assessments. Definitely, definitely. And do it in a way that puts people at ease. And do it in a way that actually builds your employer brand, where they actually say, these people take hiring seriously. These people are actively trying not to screw up my CV because they're carefully taking me through this process to see whether I'm right for them and whether they're right for me. So definitely due diligence. The fourth thing is really, really key. I'm just going to show you a model for a second, if I may, around mental toughness. And I'm not going to get into the detail here, but again, I'd like to pick this up if anybody wants to later. Don't get hung up on the language, because this is not a macho thing. And it's proven that you can't differentiate between male and female. But mental toughness is about helping people accommodate pressure and stress in the workplace. And mental toughness can definitely be coached. If we were to run a psychometric test, 48 questions, right now, it would give you a mental toughness score. But it becomes a start point of understanding you and your psyche and how we can actually build those traits and behaviours. And in simple terms, if you were a traffic officer on the highways and you've got to direct that flow of traffic past the scene where a child's being cut out of a car by the fire and rescue, would you say you've got to be a mentally tough person, having just witnessed that? You have, haven't you? But don't confuse this with needing a team full of mentally tough people, because it isn't about that. It's about having a mixture. But at a time when we're having to do more with less, making sure that we've got mentally tough people in those roles where it's required is really important. And you've got to handle your people with care. You've got to handle your people with care because they're your greatest asset. Why would you want to invest in your people and then not actually do everything that you can to actually demonstrate to them that they are an asset to the business and not a cost? So may I summarise? Okay. Just a show of hands, are there any motorcyclists in the room? If you are motorcycling or if you have had a motorcycle, just put your hands up. Okay, okay. Well, I know you're a motorcyclist. About 40% of the room, okay. Well, just a handful of things to maybe just steer you beyond this point. So what? Well, I would urge you as busy people, virtually everybody in this room is still in their work cycle. Look up and read the road ahead. More motorcyclists kill themselves than get killed because they don't see the vanishing point on the road and they leave the road and they garrote themselves on that street furniture or barbed wire fence. So let's look up from that sort of busy space that you're in right now. The second thing is have a clear plan. What line are you going to take? I got some coaching when I was taking a line. I had my bike on the right side of the white line, just about where was my head when I was taking that right-hand bend? Over the line. And that advanced motorcyclist said, pleasure. Thank you very much.